We see the word community being discussed a lot. Whether people discuss what community was like for their parents, what is lacking now, or the emphasis that we need to be making a more concerted effort to build it now. It's spoken about a lot, but there's something that I think a lot of people can't let go of that is really impeding proper efforts to build solid, long-lasting community. Hyperindividuality. Let's talk about it. Hello, happy end of winter. I really hope you've been keeping well and that any pesky symptoms have been kept at bay. If not, well, it's not long until spring now. Soon you'll start seeing buds and plants starting to form, trees regaining their leaves, and the best part, longer days. I'm really happy about that last part because I'm filming this at 3:30 and obviously a couple of months ago it would have started to be getting pretty dark. Whereas now I've got some daylight. It's England, but I don't have any of the lights on in the room. But yeah, well done if all you've been able to do this winter is survive, because it's been a tough one. So this topic has been something that's been on my mind for a while. There's an ever-present discourse online, and people are essentially saying a lot of shit, which I think really all of it boils down to their take on opinions on community. Yeah, what really made me finally sit down and actually write this was just seeing a few different tweets. I was like, okay. So an initial tweet I saw, which I agreed with, was this. I reevaluate my relationship with someone when I clock that they're never willing to experience any inconvenience at all for my sake. Not that I would delight in it, but knowing they'd never go out of their way, no matter how important, because it's just not convenient for them. Nah. See, that's fair enough, right? Well, to a lot of people on Twitter, no. Obviously, a lot of people being stupid and going pretty crazy over this. One response that I feel like summarized the energy of quite a few people read something like this. If you loved someone, you would not want to inconvenience them in the first place. Which is an odd take, right? Because generally you don't set out to inconvenience people. You won't do something with the intention to inconvenience them. But the reality of life, love, and relationships, all kind, familial, romantic, platonic, is that they involve and require inconvenience. So I think thinking that asking someone to do something that would inconvenience them for you, means that you don't love them is wild. And I think actually there's a lot of this kind of thinking or framework going right round the other way too, where people are really starting to say that you shouldn't inconvenience yourself at anyone. Do you remember the whole airport debacle where someone cut off a friend because they asked them to pick them up from the airport? Yeah. That was another one of those things that just started such a major discourse where loads of people are like, I would never pick up my friend from the airport. Why do you expect that? No. Just get an Uber. And I was like, wow. Oh my God. I didn't know people felt so strongly about this. But I think what this really, really comes down to is two things, right? So there's hyper individuality, especially in the sense of selfishness and entitlement, and its direct effect on community. And before I break those two down a bit, let's have some fun and explore what is community and where did it start? So obviously get comfy, it's time for a lovely history lesson. Chapter 1, Community Among the Ancestors. So we know that pretty far back in history, our early ancestors, early humans, were creating and engaging in forms of community. The term hunter-gatherer is thrown around a lot these days, especially with people with very uncreative, gunk-filled brains are trying to reinforce gender roles, but there's a lot more interesting stuff than that in history. There's archaeological evidence to suggest that humans were in community with each other at least 2 million years ago. So a site was found in southwestern Kenya where humans had transported stones 7 miles from somewhere else to this place, and they used the stones to butcher animals. So the site was excavated where they found some of these stone tools, as well as the bones of animals that had obviously been either slaughtered or, cut up to make meals. This, as far as I know, as far as I've seen amongst the research I did, is the earliest known record we have of this sort of thing so far, where humans were essentially completing a designated task together to create or engineer a situation that would be beneficial for all of them, but that required the input of all of them. I think, of course, in these situations that they could hunt individually if they wanted, sharpen a stick, whatever, and to prepare the food themselves. But this was better, and this was the key part of community, pooling strengths and resources together and trusting one another to bring about an outcome better than what could be done individually. Now, fast forward to 130,000 years ago, and this relationship between humans had become a lot more complex. People were now not only just living in groups, but they were mingling with other groups in their surrounding areas. Pockets of humans who lived almost 2 miles away from each other were coming together to share resources and information. Information about, what was around. Maybe hunting spots, lakes to drink, berries to harvest. And again, this really showed the crux of community. It's basically an I scratch your back, you scratch mine situation, but beneath that did lay some vulnerability. What if what you shared was a limited resource? You'd have to trust that you'd gain something worth sharing it for. But that trust was had. And that potential inconvenience was viewed as necessary to enrich the lives of all parties in the situation. Now, scientists label this cumulative culture. Obviously, humanity's intelligence and capacity for community really is responsible for the greatness that we've now achieved together as a species. Even like scientific inventions and things that people often just attribute to one individual, like Tesla, Garrett Morgan, Isaac Newton, Washington Carver, all wouldn't be possible without the cumulative knowledge gained through evolution and passed down. That also included group research, group sacrifice, modern day buildings, textiles, food recipes, all beautiful group efforts made through community. And obviously, don't think through that community is just a human thing. While for a pretty long time, it was thought that a lot of forms of community were just unique to humans. And, like some primates, they're actually very widespread. They're actually very widespread across animals too. Now, this is something really cool. Some research associates in the Department of Zoology at Oxford University conducted an experiment to see whether pigeons could do cumulative culture. They started with several pairs of pigeons and gave them specific tasks of navigation. Now, they released them from the same site, and over time they started replacing pigeons from the pairs kind of one by one. Now, these replacement pigeons had never flown the route that the initial pigeons had been given. Now, as time went on, not only did the kind of destination course get passed on to the new pigeons, but they found that as pigeons kind of came in and got replaced, they actually streamlined their routes. Rather than taking a curved route to get somewhere, they were taking straighter, more efficient routes. Amazing, right? And obviously you can see community in a lot of other animals, specifically mammals. Whether it's wolves hunting efficiently in packs to take down bigger, more dangerous prey, and elephants traveling together in herds and only moving as fast as kind of the oldest or slowest member. Community dynamics have been so fundamental to the survival and evolution of so many non-human species. And some are a lot more complex than we currently have an understanding of. But enough about animals. Obviously, you'll be saying, Femi, what do the elephants and the bees and the ants have to do with us? I'm going to come back to humans right now. Community was and is still seen as a pillar of life for our elders. And one place was so vital for them to form and maintain it: the church. Chapter 2. Elders, the church, and endless obligation. In 1948, a ship would bring 1,027 passengers to the UK, in a first of many journeys bringing Caribbean people to the UK to help rebuild it after the Second World War. His name? Empire Windrush. Over the next couple of decades, 500,000 people would come from the countries of the Commonwealth to begin a new life here. Obviously, we know how this went. Many were sold a sort of dream. One person I remember speaking to who came when he was a kid said that he pictured the UK as being paved with gold. They called it the motherland, and when he got here, he stepped foot on our land as a child, saw the grey sky, started shivering, and he started crying. That was just the first of an innumerable amount of unpleasantries the country would inflict upon its new residents. So many people had come here from sprawling communities that had been nurtured over generations, leaving them behind for the sparseness of the UK. They tried to orient themselves in the new land, and one part of that was finding a new church to go to, but a lot of them faced rejection. A bishop said of the time, "My father would tell me stories, horrible stories of the kinds of rejection and the negative experience that they had when they arrived. They were told that their presence was making the worshippers uncomfortable, and they were advised to not come back, which forced many of them to start their own house of worship." And so they did. And churches quickly became a lot more than a place of worship. They were hubs to build community, to find other black people, bluntly, who would be able to relate to their experience of leaving their nice warm country home to come to this mess. More than that though, they could work on their future together. People would come together and pull their finances together to buy and do up homes. And when any of the residents of that home moved to search elsewhere, they would use the church to find someone else to take their spot. Between the four walls of the church, a new community would be built. Between strangers and familiars, all united with the goal of making this new place home. But let's not act like this community was all sunshine and rainbows. Because the fact of the matter is, it really wasn't. The reality is, a community that a lot of our parents and grandparents took part in had a lot of fucking downsides. I mean, for one, let's start with the overwhelmingly patriarchal dynamics that were prevalent, not only in the families, but in the communities at the places of worship. That often saw men hold a lot of power in the community, and then also often made it taboo to call those same men out for any wrongdoings they committed, especially against women. For many women, any harm or wrongdoing they faced at the hands of men essentially just became a problem they had to deal with and keep to themselves, as speaking out about it could just lead to them being blamed for it or shunned from the community as a whole. Obviously, it was pretty commonplace for women to have to move on from being cheated on by their partners, lest they do anything that would disrupt the status quo of the family dynamic. Above all, men were significantly above reproach, a dynamic you could argue was just kind of like compounded by the general dynamic of the church and Christianity as a whole. So what then? Well, the reality is, while a lot of us, myself included, can sometimes look upon the community that we saw our parents and our grandparents as part of as children as amazing, especially when we see or saw them having a lot more people around them than we tend to now, and desire it. It's only that way because a lot of us just didn't really see a lot of the harm being inflicted in the background and the forced obligations many people, mainly women, had to face. And I haven't even had a chance to touch on the very obvious and loud homophobia that would have been happening that led to a whole generation of queer men living double lives, the disgusting patriarchal standards that created many men that have basically no ability to adequately express their emotions or deal with them in a healthy, mature way, or process the trauma of just being a black man in the UK, especially at that time. The community of our elders definitely did help them stay here, raise their children, travel to work together, from work safely, build homes. But it was definitely far from perfect, and if we are to take inspiration from it, we also have to acknowledge the harm that this version of community did cause, and will cause if we idealize it, like I still see some people doing, and therefore try to mimic it wholly. I think also the reality is, for many people actually, the trauma of seeing the darker parts of this version of community, the abuse, the tearing down of women over time, and sometimes even those women then enacting what happened to them, to their daughters, to their nieces, to the youngers in community, is part of what has pushed some people, maybe my generation, to hyper-individuality. And can you blame them? But moving forward now to modern times, hyper-individual or not, there was a moment in our time that would force many people to start forming new communities. Also really show some people for the selfish, truly inhuman pieces of shit that they are. Chapter 3.
We are frightened of Cornova.
Now, I'm not sure where the majority of my viewers are, or I guess the people who view this essay, because I don't know if I have consistent viewers just yet. But I'd assume most of you are from the UK. Do you not remember the madness preceding the first lockdown in the pandemic in 2020? So this would have been like March 2020. The toilet roll and dried pasta hoarding. I remember seeing this little like South Asian auntie dragging a 24 pack of water bottles that she could not carry. She was like 4 inches tall and struggling for her life. I wanted to say, auntie, these water bottles probably weigh more than you. Are you gonna make it? And I remember like at the same time going to my local Asda and the shelves were bare. Like everything was gone, and especially someone with like who can barely eat shit because of Crohn's disease, like a lot of what I could eat was gone. I remember thinking like, damn, okay, this is really real. Am I gonna starve to death? Do I have to eat the foxes I hear screaming outside at night? The panic truly bred individualism, and quickly. Like I heard stories and saw so many videos of people fighting each other for multi-packs of toilet roll. Like someone I knew was going around with their mum and someone just pulled toilet roll out of her trolley. And as she was like, no, that's mine, the person boxed her. And obviously people's hyper individuality wasn't just stockpiling. It was crazy paranoia and distrust of people. And obviously the blatant xenophobia. Do you remember the rise in anti-Asian sentiment? The attacks in the street, the vandalism of Chinese-owned restaurants. There was a massive rise in the mix of, I need to take care of myself and my people above all else, and these other people are the reason why these things are bad. And stay with me here, because some of you might think this is a leap, but these two are inherently connected. Like, look at right-wing people. They're always fucking racist, whether they're saying it out loud or not. You know they are. And their hyper individuality, when they want to talk about protecting their assets, you know, their 5 houses and a yacht, or even broke people talking about protecting the money that they don't have because they've got like £5.50 in their bank account and 2 McDonald's vouchers. The energy's never, oh, you know, I'm doing me. I'm sorry to the people that need help, though. I hope you get it. It's always that only I matter. You're a bum for needing help kind of energy. You get me? And this is explicitly why I link it to capitalism. And the pandemic, you know, obviously not only just shone a light on what was there in regards to people's capitalistic hyper individuality, but only worsened it. Community was already something people were kind of turning away from en masse, if we're being real. The pandemic just ended up being the final nail in the coffin for some people and the perfect excuse to no longer care about others. A reminder for people in the UK, but if anyone's watching not from the UK, towards the end of 2020, I think, the government started this kind of like tier system, right, where they put different locations based into different tiers based on like the amount of COVID cases or deaths. So different tiers had different amounts or lacks of privilege, such as like maybe, I can't remember, it was 1 to 5, maybe tier 1 or tier 5, I don't know which way around it was. Like the worst one would only be able to go for like your one daily walk for half an hour around the block and you're not allowed to see or chat to anyone. Whereas one of the higher up tiers would be able to have a socially distanced lunch with a group of 5, you know. Well, obviously at this point, lamenting over how much the pandemic had fucked up the economy, because clearly that was the only thing that mattered and not the multiple lives lost and the multiple people that were made disabled by it and the multiple people that lost work and you know, it was all about the economy here. It's all about money. You dying means you can't spend. The government made one move to drive loads of money back into the economy. They called it Eat Out to Help Out. I don't know what you're thinking about. When I first heard it, I was like, gladly. But it essentially enticed people to go out and spend money by offering 50% off food and drinks at participating restaurants and pubs. Now, of course, the pandemic was far from over then, so a lot of people were begging the government to rethink it and also the general public to not participate, like mainly those with compromised immune systems, the elderly, and a lot more. And the response, let me be frank, most people did not give a fuck. And let me just note, COVID's cases were still not like nothing to be scoffed at this point. It was about 1 in 500 in September 2020. And obviously the rates went up once the scheme started. And obviously, like, I know loads of people like, oh, COVID didn't kill people. And I think also the amount of people whose lives it's changed for the worse with long COVID or activating comorbidities, like this was just not a time to fuck about like that. But yeah, I think the sentiment of that really sums up people's attitudes towards the disabled. Frankly, they would happily ignore the pleas of others to limit their activity, despite knowing it could increase the chances of these people of dying or having like significantly bad effects on them that would last for a long time, just so they can enjoy themselves. Like, just so you can get a mediocre pizza and some chips, you know. And I think this sentiment really matches up with what I was talking about at the beginning of the, I don't want people to inconvenience me, you know, because it's all pretty selfish. Anyways, quick check-in, how are you all doing right now? Because I appreciate what I dropped might have been a bit, you know, but it is true, and I'm not gonna not talk about it. But if it was a lot, and I guess also for some people, if this like triggered you or made you go remember this and all the shit you went through, feel free to just pause, go and get a nice cup of water, a stretch, masturbate, I don't know, whatever makes you feel better. But yeah, I'm going to talk about some good things. So that being said, there are obviously a lot of people who are the antithesis to this hyper individuality, and to me at least, they're what the future needs. While hyper individuality was, you know, honestly thriving through the COVID years, community was taking new shape too, and it was emerging stronger than before, because it had something with which to spread its roots and connect with other people that our elders didn't. Something that could really help. The internet. Chapter 4. The children of our parents' community. How many of you ended up using Zoom way more during the pandemic? You know, a book club, a party, fucking karaoke, just a session to cry? Zoom, house party, Teams. Really did see a boom in the pandemic. And to a lot, obviously, there were just tools to use during those few months where we couldn't leave our homes. or, you know, like could just have a socially distanced walk. But to a lot of other people, they're still necessities and really vital to their life and staying connected. To the people who physically can't leave their homes, even if just barely. To the people whose loved ones live abroad or on the other side of the country. To the people building friendship with people all over the world. And Zoom isn't just the only vital thing. Like, the reality is when social media, the shithole that it is, when done right, can play a great part in it too. I think the reality for a lot of people is like proper community does come from necessity, right? And then that obviously meant that for a lot of people, especially, you know, in our parents and grandparents' time, that they just had to put up with the dark side of whatever that community entailed. But now, fresh with the experiences of many before us, and with the intention to keep spaces as safe as possible, communities are springing up which only aim to reproduce the healthier aspects of the communities that came before us. Now, speaking from my own experience finding community as someone who's Black, queer, and disabled, I don't know where I'd be without the people I found through the internet. In some of my darkest days, not just like the pandemic, but also even recently, I found the love and gentleness of people I've never even like met in person, giving me the cushion and support I need to keep going, and I've endeavored to do the same. People have been using ad revenue from their social media to donate to campaigns. Like I saw this a lot in the pandemic where people were trying to raise money to like help just raise, you know, restaurants or food for people. Also, so many of the atrocities going around the world. And I see this a lot now where people are doing a lot for Palestine, where, you know, creators with big followings are just doing that and either having people stay or they're just making the same content they always do and saying that, you know, share this and boost this because the more I get, the more I can send. And I think also then they're raising awareness of other issues and also like individual situations within these issues, right? Because a lot of global things that are happening across Congo, Palestine, Sudan, a lot of people might just look at it and think of the country when it's millions of individual people, each with their own, you know, unique in some ways situations that all need help and they all need it now. It's honestly amazing to see. Community now, I think, can make so much space for people with all different experiences and adapt to any shape. I've had the pleasure of attending a few different community groups over the past years, frequently. And I think I've seen with the ones I keep going back to, like the intention with the leaders or starters to be transparent, to keep everyone equal, and to, I think, the honesty to know that they're still human and can get things wrong and fail, and they want to adapt and learn and make everyone comfortable. Yeah, and I can see real community efforts springing up again and again. But I do warn everyone, you need to check your hyper-individuality consistently when joining communities. Because I think the reality is, especially in the West, it really is like subtly and sometimes unsubtly pumped into you. I personally think everyone needs to really like question their intentions when they join communities, because bluntly, I think a lot of people just go to communities to receive. Like, I'm going to this queer group to just make friends and then leave. Some people just go to this community so they can get clout for their, you know, Instagram page. Some people go in there just so they can shake nyash on gal or guy and then go. Like, community requires its participants to give. And of course, not on the same level and same way. Everyone will come in with different needs, different capacity, different things that they have available to them that they can give. But that's also perfect. Something I personally always ask myself when I join like community spaces, and especially like, I mean, not just attend one and see how it is, but if I've gone like 3 or 4 times and I'm like, I like this, I was like, what can I give back? You know, and I think maybe this is also because I've started a couple of groups in my time that maybe didn't last and got annoyed at how many people, even when it was close friends, just came to get shit and didn't want to go out of their way to offer or ask. So now when I come to groups, I'm always like, it's either I notice something that might be missing or I like ask the people that's starting it, what could I do? But I'll say it's anything. Like sometimes it's baking because I love baking. Sometimes it's offering a bit of emotional support to the organizers and just providing a space for them to genuinely talk about maybe things that might be a bit hard, or, you know, the complications of running spaces and facilitating all these people. But I'm always intentional about bringing something additional to the table. That's within my capabilities, obviously. And I say additional because my personality is already amazing and like a gift to behold and be amongst. And, you know, quite frankly, it's so rare and one of a kind. I'm not joking, I'm serious. I think also sometimes you might find community spaces that don't offer you quite what you need, but you're equipped to give them a little of what they need. And assuming you have like the availability of resources, physical or spiritual, you should. There's very much this mentality now of like, if it doesn't serve me, it won't be in my life. And I get that, and it does have a place, but I think sometimes also like be giving is the serving. And I really just want to be cautious because I know like, especially a lot of the people I'm in community with, like we don't have abundance, but I'm like sometimes like giving a tiny bit is still really great. And so just the effort and the intention can go a long way. And going back to, you know, just the idea of community and friendships, I'll say this briefly because I might touch on this in like a full video one day, but babe, decenter your fucking romantic relationships. This is a big part of the problem. Your friends should be your community. You should be community for your friends, not just the person who you open your legs for. You will sometimes need to go out of the way for your friends, and you should have friends that will do that for you and not resent it. You deserve it. And I think also, I say this as well, like offer to go out of your way for people. I think a lot of people just think being a good friend is waiting to be asked. And I'm not saying read people's minds, but sometimes you can see someone's going through a bit of a bind and it's like, can I take you out for dinner? Can I pay for your dinner? Can I buy your groceries? Can I come around and we just chill and I just hold you and we just watch something funny? It doesn't take much. And I think I've seen this especially in like people who I used to be friends with, where their whole life revolved around a romantic partner or finding a romantic partner. And I used to see the difference in how they'd act for people they just met versus me who they'd known for years. And I was like, interesting. You're doing all that for Missy you met 2 days ago on the bus. Or when I'm asking you to help me out, suddenly you're not sure. Suddenly you're busy. Suddenly you don't know. That's suspicious. That's weird. I'll be real. I've really seen the best examples of community from people who need it the most. I spoke to some other Black queer disabled people about this and what community meant for them before I made this video, and they all kind of had this similar vein of it formed around what they needed and it was malleable, and it made space for what they were capable of, which for a lot of them was often online. Together they created new spaces where they could just be, but also like provide space for each other. And I think that was the beautiful thing that I think was really important, because obviously the community was like centered around Black disabled queer experience, but also they, you know, were different, obviously. Like some of them were crocheters, some of them were bakers, some of them were making clothes, some of them were, you know, nude models, and that was also a big part of the experience. And all of that was welcomed alongside being around people who just would know what they spoke about when they spoke about being exhausted from the world and existing in a world that fucking tries to kill us, if I'm being real, makes it hard to survive. I think also the reality for communities for people who are really marginalized is that they don't often have the resources that they need in abundance, so can't always give each other what they fully need and what they wish they could give. But as someone said to me recently, if all you have is 40% and you give all of that, then you've given 100%. And I feel like I've seen that these spaces are really built around that idea and the premise that everyone gives what they can, and that's what makes it work. And that sometimes means that things happen sporadically rather than like the same day every month, and different people show up. And I think there's a really great analogy someone like said to my partner, they shared to me, that community should be like a choir, where, you know, you might have a choir of 15 people singing, and sometimes like there might always be 10 people singing, but 5 people drop in and then another 5 people drop out. So you've always got the consistent sound going throughout a long song, but you've got people stepping in and out, so they have breaks and can replenish their energy. And that's how community needs to operate, to make sure that no one gets fucking burnt out or exhausted. And also a cornerstone of good community that I also want to note that I feel people are lacking is calling people in rather than calling them out. And now this is definitely not a one size fits all thing, of course. But I do know that some people can be very quick to like cut off and call out and start shit, especially you gays. I'm not going to be real. I'm not going to lie. You just want to cancel everything and scream, and you with the greatest amount of privilege in the queer community who should have the most energy to talk to people about shit, or it's just like cut off. And I'm like, they're still going to go and commit harm behind your back. Like, if you can talk about these things or make an effort to educate, sometimes like a stern yet loving conversation can make things much better. Just an example, last year UK Black Pride did something pretty shady. They like waited until let me go back. UK Black Pride, if you don't know, is like a pride we have every year that it centers black and brown people, because like all the other pride festivals are frankly pretty racist. White queer spaces are racist, and no, I'm not going to argue or debate anyone on it. It's the truth, and this was formed, to center black and brown people so they felt safe. I'm not going to start, but they basically waited until the day of or the day before to announce their sponsors, and they had a couple of icky sponsors. I don't know off the top of my head. I know that at least a couple of them were benefiting from the genocide in Gaza. I'm not sure if they were selling arms, but it was really fucked. And then one of them also was a pharmaceutical company that was like one of the main manufacturers of a drug used to treat HIV, and they basically made the profit like I don't know how much % markup, but it's inaccessible for most people living with it. I think this was in the US, like, because it's so expensive. So I appreciate seeing Queers for Palestine and like a lot of groups who are helping with community-based things called UK Black Pride in were saying like, we're not trying to cancel you, but some of them withdrew because they didn't want to be a part of something raising money from an atrocity. Some of them continued because they still felt like they had a role to play in reaching their communities at such a big event. But ultimately the general energy to UK Black Pride was please do better next year. Otherwise, this will be a different conversation. And I think I noticed specifically as well in the comments, so a lot of white queer people being like, cancel, oh my God, da 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 da. Where there were more like queers of color who were coming to this situation with nuance. Obviously the jury is still out on whether UK Black Pride fixes up, but I can imagine if they don't, there will be a lot less friendly approach to them, which will be justified. I personally really, really hope they do fix up with their sponsors, and for one, just don't be so shady about it as well. I think it was the waiting until the day before or the day of, that was really, really awful and quite slimy. I'd say the healthy alternative to the toxic aspect of our elders community, where a lot of things went unchallenged, isn't purely cutting people off. Sometimes it's the conversations and the attempted rehabilitation, if the person is willing. Well, obviously, I want to make this clear, I don't mean for everything. There are definitely situations where freezing people off from a group so they can't enact more harm is the only solution. But it's not a catch-all. Like, I'm not exactly going to be one to be like, oh yeah, you just need to talk to like serial abusers. I'm like, no, cut them off. And cutting off is I think something people need to do more, especially in these situations where someone's committed harm to multiple people in a community, and something that, like I said, in like our elders' versions of community just did not happen. It needs to happen, and I think especially when we're talking about just, for example, men enacting harm against women, or just anyone enacting harm where there's a privileged dynamic, like it's the people on their level of privilege need to be the ones to hold them accountable in whatever way that is. If that's like cutting them off, fine, but also sometimes, like, I'll be real, men, we need to talk to other men about the shit they do, and I'm saying this as someone who does. And sometimes I will attempt with friends who've done shitty things to spend some time talking to them and trying to make them fix up, and if they don't, then I'm gone. But it's a responsibility, and that's a part of community and friendship and love that also needs to be thought about. But yeah, I do just want to close this off by reminding everyone that, like I said, there are so many different ways to do community, and I implore you all to continue searching for the space or spaces that work for you, but also remember that sometimes that requires discomfort. It requires you to put yourself out there, sometimes to be vulnerable, and trying and sometimes doing stuff that you just might feel you might feel a bit beggy, just because that's how I feel like society has shaped everyone to feel bad for just wanting or trying and asking to begin friendships and being honest. I think that's something I've noticed recently, is like, with new people, I have these honest conversations and just be like, I like you in whatever way. I would like to do more. And how they respond, well, says a lot about them and helps. But I've had moments on both sides. I had moments where people have been really shitty and been weird. But I've also had moments where people have been like, yeah, I really like that. I really like you too. Let's intentionally spend more time together. And then we've done that, and that might not have happened if, did not have that just very transparent, honest conversation. Now, I'm still figuring out community, of course, like anyone is, but I think I've recently been looking back on my life, especially my early 20s. And when I compare like the people around me now to the people that were around me then, I just feel so much more joyful, because I'll be real, I have less friends, but I have more love, I think. And I feel so joyful for that. And I mean love specifically in just like the tenderness, the gentleness, the understanding, the attempts to make space for me, the attempts to hear me, the attempts to make things accessible for me, which really were not there among the people I had in my life, like when I was younger. And I think I have people who show up for me in so many different ways. And that's also the beauty of forming community, is that you can go to people for different things, and people can provide different things. And I also appreciate that a lot of the people in my life, whether, written explicitly or not, like we know each other's boundaries and we know what we can ask for or what we can't. And also there's the fact that I think for me, I can ask people for stuff and they can be like, I can't right now, and that's chill. And I think that's also an important thing. I see some people like ask someone for help, they say no, I can't, and then they just never go again. And I appreciate it feels a bit crappy, but that's just how it is. That's the bumps of life sometimes. It's just that sometimes someone can't help you and whatever. And I think honestly, like them saying no, I can't right now is an act of love. And hopefully they'll be like, I can do this thing. As I've had sometimes people like, I'll do this doodle for you. I'll egg that guy's house. But the levels of community I have in my life are beautiful. Like I have my fiance, who I obviously live with and cares for me, and we have such a beautiful, tender, very intimate and close love. I also have my best friend, who is also disabled, lives on the other side of the city, so we barely see each other, but we send each other care packages when we can and do little doodles. And I also have so many people online who I haven't even spoken to on the phone yet, who show up for me just online sometimes when I just need a vent, or I need some encouragement, or sometimes I'm even just asking people to send me, if I've had a really rough day, I just ask people, can you send me nice things that have happened to you in the past month, just to steer myself away from it a bit. These all help. And I think having these different tiers and levels of connection with people all combined are a vital part of community and a necessity for us. I think this is the thing, I think community is a necessity for people, and a lot of people have forgotten that, and the hyper-individualism that a lot of people have is attempting to scrub that away. But luckily there are a lot of people who aren't selfish capitalistic pricks, basically. As always, thank you so much for watching. I don't know if this is a long one. It feels like a long one. It was like 9 pages. But I hope you've enjoyed it and you've enjoyed my thoughts. It might have been a bit rambly, but I'd really love to know your thoughts on anything. Just how's community in your life? Do you feel like you have an abundance of it, not enough of it, a distinct lack of it? Are you experiencing loneliness? Have you found it hard to build community? Have you found it easy? What do you think about individualism? Do you desire community more? Do you have a really interesting way of doing community? If you have anything to share just about your thoughts or things in your life, please share, because I'm really, really intrigued to discuss this with people who think about this as well, and would just love to hear from people, especially all over wherever you are. I'm in London, so especially if you're not from London, I'd really love to hear from you, whether it's another town or city in the UK or abroad, especially as it would relate to maybe your culture as well. I'm so intrigued. I've gone on for a lot. I really hope you have a good rest of your day, your evening, your night, whatever you do. I hope you take care of yourself, and before you know it, it'll be summer and we can have our nipples out and be sunbathing together, and it'll be amazing. Love you, bye.